move into operating it, just keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
And then maybe way down the line, they bring someone in to do an audit.
So build it, run it, then check if it was risky. That sounds backwards.
It is, precisely. And what often happens, right, is during that late audit, they discover, uh-oh, we didn't really think about risk up front.
Oops.
Yeah, and the system doesn't actually meet the security needs, or it's not resilient enough. So they end up having to go back, sometimes completely re-architecting the whole thing.
Ouch. That sounds messy and expensive.
Incredibly. It's inefficient, it costs a fortune, and you've been vulnerable that whole time.
So if doing it last is a big mistake, what's the core argument the source makes for the right way? Where should risk analysis fit?
The fundamental point is, risk analysis has to be the very first step. It's the foundation. Everything else builds on it.
Okay, step one, before anything else.
Before anything else, your risk analysis should inform your policy, the rules, the requirements for what you need to protect. Then that policy informs your architecture, how you actually design the system, the network, the controls.
Policy drives design.
Right. And that architecture then dictates how you implement it, how you operate it day to day, and what your audits check for later. It's got to be top down, starting with understanding the risks.
That makes so much more sense, designing with the potential problems in mind from the get-go. Okay, so even if we know how to analyze risk technically, how good are we at just intuitively judging risk? The source had that wild example, didn't it? About our gut feelings.
Oh, you mean the cows versus sharks?
Yes, that one. It's kind of unsettling.
It is memorable, for sure.
Yeah.
Because it totally messes with our usual ideas of what's dangerous. The question the source asks is simple. Based on U.S. statistics, what kills more people every year, cows or sharks?
Okay, well, my immediate reaction, probably thanks to movies and, Shark Week, is sharks. Definitely sharks.
Right, that's what everyone thinks. You picture the fin, the teeth. But statistically, the reality is quite different. In the U.S., roughly 20 people die each year from cow-related incidents.
Wait, hold on. 20? From cows? What are they doing stampeding down Main Street? How does that even happen?
Well, the source mentions farm animal accidents generally, so it could be getting kicked, crushed, things like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, the exact how isn't the main takeaway.
Okay.
The number is the point, around 20. Now, compare that to the average number of deaths from shark attacks in the U.S. each year.
All right, what's the shark number?
It's about 1.
1. Seriously. So 20 deaths by cow, 1 by shark. Statistically, we should be like 20 times more scared of Bessie than Jaws.
Based purely on those numbers, yes. Which is exactly the source's point. Our gut instinct, fueled by media hype and fear, is often completely wrong about actual risk.
Wow. Okay, my mind is kind of blown. Maybe we need Cow Week instead. It really shows why you can't just rely on feelings for this stuff.
Absolutely. It perfectly illustrates the gap between perceived risk and statistical reality. Formal analysis forces you to look at the data, the evidence, not just what feels scary. Now, shifting from those external threats and perceptions, the source also talks a lot about knowing yourself. Or, in this context, knowing the organization you're trying to protect.
Like that Sun Tzu quote.
Exactly. From The Art of War. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So how does knowing yourself fit into risk analysis?
Well, it seems to connect directly to this idea of risk tolerance, right? Or risk appetite. Basically, how much risk is an organization or even an individual actually okay with?
Spot on. It's about understanding that comfort level with potential danger.
And the source gives those really clear, simple examples using travel. Like, you've got the person with super low risk tolerance. They'll only take the train.
Right. The slow but perceived safe option.
Might take them days to get somewhere, but hey, the perceived risk is practically zero, and that fits their comfort zone.
Okay.
Then you have someone, maybe like me, who flies. I accept a bit more risk, statistically speaking, than the train person.
A calculated risk.
Yeah, because I value the speed, the convenience. It's within my personal tolerance.
Makes sense.
And then you've got the neighbor who, I don't know, jumps out of perfectly good airplanes with a parachute.
The thrill seeker.
Their tolerance for risk is just way, way higher than the train or plane person.
Yeah, completely different level.
And the key point the source makes is that none of these are inherently better or worse, right? They're just different levels of comfort with risk, different trade-offs people make.
Precisely. And organizations. They're exactly the same. They aren't monolithic. Each one has its own unique risk tolerance.
Driven by what? Their business? Their culture?
Yeah, their business model, the industry they're in, their company culture, the regulatory pressures, the leadership's attitude. It all feeds in. And if you, as a security professional, don't grasp that specific organization's tolerance, are they the cautious train, the balanced plane, or the high-flying parachute?
Yeah.
You can't possibly design the right defenses for them.
Because what works for one wouldn't fit the other at all.
Exactly. A security setup for a super risk-averse company will look totally different, maybe even stifling, to a company that needs to be agile and accepts more risk to innovate quickly. Now, while every organization is unique, the source does point out that certain industries often have common starting points or perspectives on risk. It uses the CIA triad as context.
Ah, yes. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. Maybe just a super quick refresher on those.
Sure. It's confidentiality, keeping secrets secret, basically. Preventing unauthorized access to sensitive data.
Got it.
Integrity, making sure the data is accurate, trustworthy, hasn't been messed with.
Yeah.
And availability, ensuring systems and data are up and running, accessible when needed. And different industries tend to prioritize these differently, naturally.
Like manufacturing.
Yeah, manufacturing. What's their biggest nightmare? Production lines stopping.
Mm.
So availability is usually king for them. Keep things running, whatever it takes.
Okay. And finance?
Financial sector, dealing with money, sensitive customer info. They're often laser focused on confidentiality and integrity. Can't have numbers being wrong or stolen. They also tend to be generally very risk intolerant and love using those precise quantitative models we might talk about later.
Right. Very buttoned down. What about healthcare?
Healthcare, another interesting one. Top priority. Patient safety, obviously. That links to confidentiality, protecting patient records. Think HIPAA, but also heavily relies on the integrity and availability of systems used for treatment. So they're extremely risk-averse when it comes to anything impacting patient care, maybe a bit less so in other areas, but patient safety is paramount.
That makes sense.
But, and this is the crucial point the source emphasizes, even within the same industry, say you take 3 different banks, their specific risk tolerances can be wildly different.
Like the train, plane, and parachute examples again.
Exactly. One bank might be super conservative, the train. Another might be pretty standard, the plane. And a third might be more aggressive, maybe trying new fintech things, closer to the parachute.
Yeah.
You have to look at the specific organization, not just the industry label.
That's a really vital distinction. Don't just assume based on the sector. Okay, so we get the big picture. What risk analysis is, why it needs to come first, how our intuition fails, understanding tolerance. So how do we actually analyze a specific risk we've identified? What factors does the source say we need to look at?
Right. Okay, so you've spotted a potential problem. Now you got to figure out how much it actually matters.
Yeah.
The source gives us sort of 4 key things to weigh up. What's the absolute first thing?
Well, it feels like you need to know what's at stake, right? The source talks about the value of the asset.
Exactly. Step 1, how valuable is the thing that's at risk? Because not everything is equally important. The source uses that spectrum idea. Right?
Yeah, it could be something minor like, I don't know, the lunch menu posted online.
Yeah.
All the way up to what they call the keys to the kingdom.
Right, the crown jewels.
Stuff that, if it gets compromised, could literally kill the business, an existential threat. So, value is number 1. What's next after value?
Likelihood. How likely is the bad thing to actually happen?
Yep, the likelihood or probability. Is this a common occurrence or a once-in-a-blue-moon kind of event?
Okay, value, likelihood, then cost.
Right, the cost, if it does occur, if the risk actually materializes, what's the damage? Financially, operationally, reputationally. What's the real impact?
So the consequence of losing that valuable thing.
Precisely. And then the final piece.
The cost to stop it. Yeah, the cost of protection or mitigation. Would it actually take time, money, resources to put defenses in place or reduce the impact? The source notes, interestingly, that tech folks often want to jump straight here, right? Oh, how do we fix it?
Yeah, apply the tech solution.
But really, you need the other 3 pieces of info. First, value, likelihood, impact, cost, before you can properly evaluate if the cost of protection makes sense.
Okay, so value, likelihood, cost, if it happens, cost of protection. Analyze those 4 things. Then what? We've done the analysis. What are our options for responding? Can't just leave it there.
No, exactly. Analysis without action is kind of pointless. The source lays out 5 main ways you can respond once you've analyzed a risk.
5 options. Okay, what are they?
First, you can avoid it. Pretty straightforward. You just choose not to do the risky thing at all.
Like deciding not to parachute, going back to that example.
Exactly. Just, nope, not doing it. Second option, accept the risk.
Accept it. Just live with it.
Yeah, you acknowledge it exists, you've looked at it, and you make a conscious call that the potential fallout is tolerable. Maybe because fixing it costs too much or the likelihood is super low. Like, Getting on an airplane, there's risk, but we generally accept it. Everything has some risk you might accept.
Okay. Avoid. Except what's third?
Third is transfer. This usually means legally shifting the responsibility for the risk onto someone else.
How? Like in a contract?
Yeah, often through contracts, service-level agreements, outsourcing deals. If the bad thing happens, legally it's their problem, not yours.
Gotcha. Transfer. Number 4.
Number 4 is indemnify. The source calls it a fancy word, but you know what it means.
Insurance.
Basically, yeah, buy insurance. You pay a premium, and if the risk hits, the insurance company covers the loss, or at least part of it. Makes you financially whole again.
Okay. Avoid, accept, transfer, indemnify. One left.
The 5th one is mitigate. This is where you actually implement controls.
Ah, the techie favorite.
Often, yeah. But it could be technical controls like firewalls or encryption, or it could be procedural controls like new policies, training, background checks. Anything you do to actively reduce the likelihood of the risk happening or lessen the impact if it does, down to a level you're comfortable with.
So mitigate is about actively reducing the risk level.
Exactly. And it's just one of the 5 choices, even though it's often the first one people think of, especially in tech.
Avoid, accept, transfer, indemnify, or mitigate. That's a clear set of choices. Now, when we're doing that analysis part, before choosing a response, the source also mentioned different styles of assessment, like numbers versus gut feelings.
Right, the difference between quantitative and qualitative assessment. Quantitative is all about the numbers.
Spreadsheets, calculations.
Yeah, trying to assign precise dollar figures, probabilities, expected losses. You build models, you calculate. It looks very objective, very scientific.
I sense a but.
Well, the forest cautions against becoming, as it puts it, a slave to the spreadsheet, meaning those numbers look precise, but where did they come from? Often, the inputs, especially things like the likelihood of a brand new type of cyber attack, are just educated guesses, estimates.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Kind of. Or at least compounded uncertainty. You're multiplying estimates by estimates, and the final number might look exact, but it could be built on pretty shaky ground.
Okay, so that's quantitative. What's the other way? Qualitative.
Qualitative uses broader categories. Think high, medium, low, or red, yellow, green.
Less precise numbers, more like general rankings.
Exactly. It allows for more judgment, for incorporating factors that are really hard to put a number on. It brings that gut instinct back in, but in a structured way.
So neither one is perfect on its own.
Probably not. The source sort of implies you often need a mix. It uses this analogy of making soup, you throw different ingredients in, quantitative bits, qualitative assessments, expert judgment, to get the full picture, the overall flavor of the risk.
I like that, the risk soup analogy. Okay, and just to bring this all home, connecting the analysis, the responses, the cost, that final example the source used was really clever. The trick question.
The Meteor-Proofing question. Yeah, it's great. So the question is, if I offered to sell you something that would make your car completely meteor-proof, would you buy it?
My immediate reaction is, no, that's absurd. Why would I?
And why is it absurd?
Because the chance of my car getting hit by a meteor is practically zero, right? It seems like a waste of money.
Exactly. You're instinctively doing a rough risk calculation. Likelihood, tiny, versus impact, potentially high, car destroyed, versus the assumed cost of protection, probably high for meteor-proofing. But then the source tweaks it. What if the meteor-proofing device only cost 1 penny?
Oh, well, for a penny, yeah, sure, why not? I'd buy it. The cost is basically nothing.
And boom, that's the punchline. The decision isn't just about likelihood and impact and isolation. It's always weighed against the cost of the response, the cost of protection or mitigation.
Even for a crazy low probability event.
Right. If the fix is cheap enough, even a tiny risk might be worth addressing. It shows that risk decisions are fundamentally economic decisions, too. You're always balancing the risk against the resources needed to deal with it.
That really does tie it all together nicely. Okay, so quick recap of this deep dive based on your source material. Risk analysis isn't just some tech task you tack on at the end.
Definitely not.
It's foundational. It should be the first thing you do. It's about systematically identifying threats, evaluating them using factors like value, likelihood, potential cost, and the cost to protect, and then making a conscious choice from that menu of responses. Avoid, accept, transfer, indemnify, or mitigate.
And when you do that properly, when you do that analysis up front, you make informed choices. You build defenses, cybersecurity or otherwise, that actually match the organization's real risk tolerance and the actual threats.
Instead of just guessing or using a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. It lets you be strategic, proactive, not just constantly reacting to problems. And ultimately, that makes you more resilient. a harder target for the bad guys, But these ideas, they apply way beyond just cyber. It's really about making smarter decisions when faced with uncertainty, which is, well, pretty much all the time.
Absolutely. So thinking about all this, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about a significant decision you made recently that involves some risk. Could be anything, career, finances, a project. How much of your decision was based on consciously weighing those factors we talked about, the potential outcomes, the likelihoods, the costs?
Good question.
And how much was maybe more driven by your gut feeling, your personal comfort level, that sort of innate risk tolerance we discussed? Or try looking at a company you deal with often. Based on what you observe, what do you think their main risk focus or tolerance level might be? Are they a train, a plane, or a parachute kind of organization?
Yeah, interesting to think about.
We really hope this deep dive into the material you brought us has given you some valuable perspective on thinking about and managing risk, whether it's in the digital world or just navigating everyday life.